and welcome, Dangerlings. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time to get dangerous again here with Dangerous Wednesdays. Yes, indeed. Hello, Chris. First in the box. It is Wednesday, and it is a live stream. And here I am, James Foxy Lockhart, your host as usual for Dangerous Wednesdays, and joined the ever present, ever irrepressible Dungeon Master. Hey, Dan.
Who's the president? Ronald Reagan? The actor?
What's the date? The year.
What year is it?
Indeed.
Genuinely.
No, generally don't know. Generally don't care as well. We had some discussion.
For this next hour. Yeah, for this next hour, we do not care.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there are events going on in the world, as there always will be. But for those of you watching post, these events will probably be long past. You know, either be weeping or cheering or just indifferent as general. But for tonight, we like to disappear into fantasy worlds of our own making, which are, frankly, usually far more sane. I'd rather fight a dragon any day. So, Dan, how you been?
Absolutely, I'm doing all right. It's the final day. Without talking too much about the real world, it's the final day before Lockdown 2 Electric Boogaloo kicks in here in the UK. So it's the last day we can be out of the house. I had my last trip to the gym, which has just been my life. I've become a real gym person since they reopened because it's the only place I can go, basically.
Yeah,
because there's nowhere else open. But that's closed now, so I've done that, and I'm back here. I'm nested. And I'm ready to. I'm settled in, ready to sit here and make Santa videos.
Yes, exactly.
You and I have been making working on a fun thing where we've been helping Father Christmas to send videos to people who are not able to go and visit him in person.
No.
That's been a lot of fun.
Now, Daniel, I don't have to tell you about my spoiler rule, please. There might be some Dangerlings who still believe in Father Christmas, and if you do, we're merely helping out Father Christmas.
I believe in Father Christmas. I'm saying that you and I have been helping him.
We have been helping him.
He goes out.
Of course, I do apologise if any of you do believe in Father Christmas. But yes, we've been helping out Father Christmas. I mean, Father Christmas is basically drum. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think we all knew that anyway, didn't we?
Well, yes.
Yeah,
there's a lot of but it's important work to help Santa out at this difficult time. 15 quid a pop. Let us know if you want one.
His rates have gone down. He's even feeling the pinch. The big FC, the man up there in the North Pole. Hello, Greg, and his last
Greg.
day at the gym as well. And hello, Steph. Nice of you to join us. Thank you very much. And yes, generally, as you can see, it's the usual state of banter here in digital and real Danger Towers. We do not care for the real world, and there's.
I'm being rude. How are you, James?
Oh, just getting by. Big man's getting competitive with those rates. Yeah, he is, isn't he? Yeah, he's definitely. I think he's got his advertising elves on full standby. But so I'm doing all right. I think it's it's just reminding yourself of the things you can control, and that there's value in the small lives that we can lead, rather than worrying about all of the panoply of chaos that the world exists in at the moment. But as long as we've got each other, and do we have each other?
Wise words.
I clearly don't have Dan, so that's that piece of support network shut down. Cool.
You said that very quietly, James.
I said it to my mic.
Of course you have me. You always have me, but you also forget that I can't see you while we're streaming. So I know when you send me subtle.
No, I thought I said it into my mic, but clearly, it's the voice. It's just the voice.
What are we doing today, James?
Well, we have a couple of pieces of news. This is literally what you told me before we went on air, but we've got a couple of pieces of news. But then also an idea that we did have was to look at some characters that we've had over the years and just have a good old chat about them and which ones we liked and why, and maybe pit them into a virtual death match as well. That's something I just threw in there.
Good. If we had time to bring character sheets, that would have been fun.
I mean, we'd have to roll, but I think it's just a general sort of conversation about sort of, fantasy fight. Who would win? And I think that'd be quite fun. Literally just came up with that on the fly. Boom! That's what you get on Dangerous Wednesdays.
Full of ideas.
Yes. And of course, Dangerlings, how are you? Let us know on the chat. I will be relaying things to Dan and get talking. And if there's anything you want us to answer, of course, do let us know, because we are here for you. But I think, leaving those aside, I've got the picture behind you that relates to today, does it?
It does, yes. Hang on.
Splendid. That's a fine picture. A fine picture. So
It's
I
beautiful.
won't ask any questions about that because I was like, first question, what is that? But I think we're going to come to that. But for now, shall we move on to little news? Yes.
You can do the sting.
Danger news. So, what have we got on Danger News? That's the only time every week that I use that voice, and it kills me until the next Wednesday.
It gets more gravelly every week, man. It's great.
Yes.
Okay, we got 2 items of news in Paizo World this week, and it's all playtest related. It's all playtest at the moment. So the first one is some news that came out yesterday, I think. Very new news, and that is that we are getting a new Starfinder playtest coming up for a new Starfinder class. We had the playtest for the Nano site a little while ago. It's now been announced we have a new class coming out for Starfinder in the near future. It's going into playtest, and that class is called the Precog.
Oh.
We know very little about it, almost nothing about what it actually does. Presumably.
I was going to say, normally
presumably it's got a bit of a Minority Report kind of vibe, is what I'm figuring.
Yes. Sorry, I think there's a little bit of delay between our chats, but yeah, exactly that. Yeah, precognition is the normal thing that it stands for, isn't it? So yeah, very Minority Report, Chris says. Oh, and we know nothing about it, Dan.
Pretty much, no. They've announced what it's called. They've announced that the playtest is going to. What we know is that the playtest is going to start on the 16th of November. That is when you'll be able to download the kind of beta versions of the rules, and it's going to run until Christmas Day, so you can play it until then. And interestingly, you are also going to be able to play it in Society Play. They announced that today, so you can. You won't be able to. I don't think you can make an original character for it. But what you can do is they're releasing pre-gens of the precog at all of the different tiers for Society Play, for Starfinder Society. So you can go and pick up one of those as a sort of pre-made character and play Society games with the playtest version of this character. Send your feedback to Paizo, help them make the character, but you can keep the credits and the rewards you get for that character. You can transfer onto your other character, just like playing a pre-made normally works on any of them. So that's quite nice. You get to actually use it in organized play for a little bit to see what it's going to be like.
So there potentially could be this huge wave of precognition sort of Jedis come sweeping through the games, and then they just go at Christmas Day.
Yeah, I will be interested to see what this class is like, because the Starfinder classes have been weird and kind of pleasingly weird, actually, because they're absolutely not just spacey versions of Pathfinder classes. Since we've had launch, we've had stuff like the Witch Warper, who sort of changes reality. You've got the Vanguard who harnesses entropy to basically defend, like it tanks through entropy. It's really complicated. You've had the biohacker.
Starfinder, complicated? No.
Well, this is not even like, I'm not even talking mechanically. I'm talking like the physics of it is it really interesting. You know, it's just kind of like, wow, they've really, like, there's some real science thought has gone into some of these character classes. They're not it's something I quite like about Starfinder classes is, other than sort of the core ones are fairly, like your operative and your soldier and stuff are relatively straightforward, but like all of the advanced classes, you can't really say it's this. You kind of have to explain the feel of it and how it fits within the world. And so it makes them stuff that you can move on to when you understand the setting a little bit more. And it makes them very thematic rather than just being kind of like, it's your space barbarian.
It's not to say that you couldn't be a space barbarian who harnesses the power of entropy, but, still. Isn't it about aging?
I'm excited about
the law of entropy.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say it's one of the laws of thermodynamics. I think it's the second law of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is entropy. It's basically about age, I think, and everything suffers from entropy. And
it is the natural state of all things to tend towards chaos.
Yes, and dissolution.
Exactly. Yes. So eventually things move apart.
So effectively, it's like a character that will kill you very, very slowly. But when he does, it'll be very messy. Is that kind of the thing that he does? They do.
Yeah, well, they're a constitution-based class, so yes, they will probably kill you quite slowly, because I don't think they do ton of damage, but I'm sure there are builds that do.
For all those thrilling games
but
out there.
precog sounds interesting. I like information-based characters. I like characters that have ways of gaining knowledge. They're always interesting to play. They're always interesting to GM. I wonder if it's going to pull on some of the threads from the investigator class in second edition, where it had things like the investigator's got a really cool ability where they can basically roll their attack before they make the attack. And so they can see what the dice roll would have been before they commit to actually taking the action, which I think is a really lovely idea. And I can see how something like that could fit into a precog kind of character.
Yes.
So I'm interested.
It sort of sounds like it might as well dovetail into a little bit of envoy as well, that kind of diplomacy and sort of language-based skills as well, with a bit of precognition. Or interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to find out. So it's 16th of November, so a couple of weeks we'll find out exactly what is in it. I'm sure that Paizo will be doing the rounds and we'll be talking about it a bit more on the blog in the run-up to that. So hopefully we'll get a bit of an idea of that.
Sounds awesome.
But if you do take part in it, you will genuinely get to help develop this class, and the version of the class that will be released later will be based on the sort of the feedback that you will be giving if you play this. You go to starfinderplaytest.com if you want to do that, or you can go through the Paizo thing. Yeah. The reason we know that your feedback will help influence the outcome of this class is that our second news item is that there has been an update on the Pathfnder playtest that ended a little while ago. Paizo have published some of the results of it, and this is for the 2 new classes that are going to be coming up in Secrets of Magic next year, and that is the Magus and the Summoner. So there was a playtest for the 2 of those a little while ago, which ran for a bit, where you could try out, have a go with the new classes, see how they played, and then give feedback on them. And Paizo have been very open with it, where they've published a lot of their findings of it. I think they've actually become very open in general on the playtest results since second edition came out, it has been great. I think a lot of it was because there was a lot of misunderstanding with Pathfinder second edition playtest when that came out, because the second edition playtest wasn't a particularly enjoyable game to play in a lot of ways, and that's because it wasn't meant to be, because it was a playtest. It was a test to see if the game worked. Yeah, so there were things like, there was a scenario that was almost impossible because it was there to test the death mechanics. It was there to find out about dying, and so there were lots of things that didn't quite work, and things that weren't quite finished. And I think what happened is, in this age of early access games on Steam, people assumed that they were getting the full game, a few months before the actual game came out, and then when it wasn't what they expected, they thought second edition was going to be awful, and then second edition came out and it's a completely different game. And that's what these playtests are. They really are for developing stuff. But it's made Paizo kind of a bit more a bit more upfront about discussing the results of these playtests, so that they've got some ideas of them.
I think that's
do you want to hear some of the sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a tremendously good move by Paizo, because it like you say, it makes people feel more involved in the process, and also giving that all-important feedback. But also, because this debate has raged about, you still get people who buy an early access game, say, use the example on Steam, and then complain and moan that stuff is broken, or stuff's not there, or I fell through the floor. And it's like, that was always the purpose of early access. It was like an early testing phase for smaller studios, so they wouldn't have to, because they can't do it later. So good for you, Paizo. I think it's great. Let's have some examples, I think you said.
Okay, so some of the main criticism, I don't know if any of the Dangerlings had a go at any of the playtest stuff. Do shout out, because it'd be great to know.
Candice will be having a look, she says, at the Starfinder playtest that's coming up, so that'd be good. Do let us know if you've took part.
Candice already has one multi-class in our Starfinder game, so
maybe Racket will become precog as well. I mean, who knows? She's already complicated enough. So
fine. They've got digital character sheets now. They work out the difficult maths on it, so that's
true.
You can have as many multi-classes as you like.
Yeah.
Right. So the Magus, very popular class in first edition. So a spell slinger, somebody who fights with a sword in one hand, spells on the other, put touch spells in your sword, hit people, they explode, all that fun stuff. So they were always going to come through. some of the feedback they've had in general on them as the playtest version, they're very difficult to understand, and they're not varied enough. So they're very, very powerful if they do if they are played in one particular way. Like they
Right.
all of their stuff is built around spell strike, which is putting magic into your weapon and attacking with it, which does an enormous amount of damage. But if you miss with it, you lose all of the prep that you've put into it, and you end up having a really boring turn. And you also have to really build around it to try and make it work. So there's not really any varied strategies. It is just like you stack True Strike until you to hit is really high, and then you hit with your thing that does loads of damage, and you blow someone up, and then you just do it again.
Right. It's
Which
the
isn't a
Eldritch
very
Fire
Pathfinder way of playing.
Yeah, because that was the Eldritch Fire thing you found with a was it Necromancer you played? I can't remember.
The Warlock in 5e,
Warlock.
yeah, where you cast the same. You literally your attack rotation is the same four things.
Why would you bother doing anything else? Because it works so well. Yeah. It's an interesting trap that you can, I think, quite easily fall into with character design. On the mechanic side, not the personal side, sort of thing.
But that's the sort of thing that that's the sort of thing that a playtest brings out that testing around the table or looking at it on paper generally doesn't, because you have this very, very well thought out ability. And if Paizo are guilty of anything from a game design standpoint, it is designing beautifully crafted things that sometimes are a little bit too clever for their own good. So they've got this wonderful thing, but then when you give it to loads of players, you find all of the players are just using one ability because it's the best one, and it's not an exceptionally fun ability to use. So they've got all this other stuff that could be more fun, but it's not quite the best strategy. So that's the big thing for the Magus, is that they're going to change it. It involves completely redoing Spell Strike, which is apparently quite a big job, but they're going to work on it to do that, to make the Magus something that is more varied, that has a lot more options.
Right. Okay.
The summoner, who is the lady behind me here.
Oh,
love that art. Really
that's
fun.
Great artwork. Yeah, very nice.
So you're going to get to summon your Eidolon. Your Eidolon is like a particularly powerful summoned creature that follows you around and does your bidding, and you can upgrade them as you start. There aren't going to be a huge number of changes to the summoner, because the summoner was, according to sort of general feedback, was one of the most popular or the most well-received playtest characters they've done, apparently second only to the Swashbuckler, which ended up being almost exactly the same as it was in playtest, because they put out the playtest version and everyone loved it. So there aren't going to be too many differences. There are going to be a lot more Eidolons out of the box in the playtest. You've got an option of 4. In the final version, you're going to have about 10 different types of Eidolon to choose from. So if you want your dragon, if you want a demon, an angel, whatever, you're probably going to have those options. And of course, they're going to get added to as things go along. There are going to be more customization options, possibly from quite early on as well. So you'll be able to start changing up your Eidolon and making it unique from quite early on, rather than having to wait a little while to do that.
Cool.
The other thing that they've leaked just now, the one last thing about the summoner that they've added in since the playtest launch, is they're going to get summoners are going to get a high level ability called Incarnate, which we will recognize the name of from Divinity. It's not quite the same as Divinity.
It's not going to be a
Incarnate
tiny Scot.
Is a tiny angry
Scot. The Incarnate in Divinity just looks like a tiny Scot. So he became a tiny Scot. He does. Same chin and everything. It's great.
We were disappointed when we leveled up and it became massive, because it didn't look like
it didn't look like him at all. And it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't the size of Scott that looked like him. It was just the facial features. Then when he became the big champion, he didn't look like him at all. But the little one was just like, oh my God, Scott. Quick, summon a Scott.
So angry.
So good. So angry.
But I love that game.
Yeah, it's great.
But the Incarnate, so the Incarnate ability is going to be a top, I don't know if it's level 20, but it's a very high level. I think it's a level 7 spell, so it's whenever you get that. So it's a very high level spells. And what it is a single turn mega summon. So it's a summoned creature that appears for one turn, does something huge, like it can appear, take a stride action, take the action it has listed on its ability like Swarm of Ghosts or Massive Explosion or something like that, and then it disappears again. So it's basically a Final Fantasy
I
summon.
was going to say Final Fantasy. Yeah, that's precisely what they did.
Yeah.
Where they do the big dance, then the thing arrives, and it zooms down from the heavens, and goes, and then it just buggers off. And you're like, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, done.
I'm
Amazing.
so on board with that. I
Yeah.
think that sounds great.
And I think for DMs as well and GMs to be able to story tell that, I mean, I don't think it'll get tired, will it? Like, because I imagine there's quite a lot of prep, or it's a one use per day or something like that. You can't just spam that every turn, surely.
No, but it's a spell, but it's effectively like it's a high level spell. So it's like, rather than having a sort of your really high level fireball or your meteor storm or something like this, you just have a thing that summons an army of ghosts that run across the battlefield and take out loads of people, like at Lord of the Rings or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it only goes for one turn and then it's done, and you can do that once. I just think that's really creative, and it's a really good way of kind of keeping the summoner theme while getting away from this thing of just filling the battlefield with loads of monsters that the GM just has to play for you.
Yeah.
Or you and your turn ends up taking half an hour because you've got so many things on. I like a thing that's just like one thing, looks cool, loads of damage, move on.
Yeah, because
that's my kind of.
I wonder if there's such a thing as summoner guilt. Because certainly I noticed it a couple of times when, so actually Candice, she played one in a 5e campaign that Ross ran quite a while ago now, and did exactly that. You know, here's the 7 wolves, and I think we've spoken about it a little bit, and there is that kind of slight awkwardness where it gets to the summoner's turn, and it just goes on, and on, and on, and on, and everyone else around the table, just you can see everyone's shoulders slumping, because it's like, cool, and then, oh, cool, it's my turn, I cast that, great, okay, now it's back to the summoner, and it goes on. And you know, it's like it's not particularly fun to play. Useful.
I want to play an Unchained Summoner in first edition so much, because they're the class that can just like, they get a weaker Eidolon. Not Unchained. Well, it's Unchained Summoner, and then it might be a Master Summoner or something like that. There's an archetype for it, where basically you get a weaker Eidolon, but it removes the cap effectively on how many summons you can have active at the time. So you can just flood the battlefield with creatures, which just seems like such a cool image for me, but practically speaking, I bet it's not much fun for anyone around you. It's probably not fun for you, because you have to remember the stat blocks of 6 different monsters. You're basically GMing yourself.
Yeah, and I think that if that was done, I think we spoke about it. Candice is just saying, the 8 Jaguars, Ball Lake. I think we mentioned it last week. You would probably stat block them and go like, okay, so you've summoned literally a horde of spiders. I'm going to group them into 3 groups, and they can act as sort of swarms. So, you know, you get this much. That's their stats. That's one way to do it, because otherwise it's just like you say, I summoned 25 spiders. You're like, oh, cool. See you next week.
How are the Dangerlings feeling about the playtest classes? Any excitement about the Magus or the Summoner?
A little bit. They've been a little bit quiet, which is absolutely fine, because they're listening attentively. And also, we weren't sure how many people are actually watching this, given everything that's going on. But Greg had some summoners in his Edgewatch game. So there we go.
Cool.
So there we go. That was from talking earlier. The Shocking Grasp Magus in 1E, ZZZ. Because apparently we're talking about, this using one thing all the time. And then a comment I don't understand. Angel Summoner, just need a BMX bandit now. Greg, what do you mean?
That's a Mitchell and Webb look joke.
Right, that's why I don't get it. Right, okay, fair enough. Very good, very good.
Very, very, very nice. Speaking of Agents of Edgewatch, the new Agents of Edgewatch book came out, or it's been announced, and it has the coolest cover in the world. It is just like, it's someone like diving towards the water, where there is a 2-headed shark coming out with one of the iconic characters hanging over its mouth, and like the swashbuckler or someone is just flying towards it, swords drawn. It's so good.
Wow,
it's so
cool.
good.
The art department is top class. Well done.
Yeah, they're doing good.
Yeah. Yes, and Chris has just gone in with a quote, I presume, from Mitchell and Webb, and I'll use all my powers to summon angels and stop all the bad guys. But see, now with this new system, you can actually be a Mitchell and Webb character if you wish. You could be the angel summoner. So yeah, it sounds really, really interesting, and I love that kind of love that visual dynamic. of that kind of spell. That's so cool. And to know, as also the kind of bragging rights to know that you've got a spell. And it also reminded me of Golden Axe. We could just like, when suddenly a dragon just swoops down and clears the battlefield with fire and then just buggers off, and you're like, yeah, he's with me.
Summoner is the character class across both versions of Pathfinder that I want to play the most and have never played. Like,
really?
Why? It's the one that appeals to me the most as something to try out.
Why have you not? Because we're going to speak about characters a bit later, but what was that a choice, or you just never got the chance?
I never get a chance to play, really. And the few times I've had a chance to play have been quite quick pick-up games where I haven't had time. Like, they've been sort of convention games where I've wanted something a bit simpler that I can get into straight away, or something that is fun from level one rather than something like, because casters, you generally have to play them for a few levels before they really bed in and start getting good. As I'm sure you found with Zelda, it takes, before you get your really fun abilities, it takes a couple of levels. So I generally go for stuff that's a bit easier.
Yeah, especially if you're unfamiliar with the system as well, it can be easier just to jump in, or a character class, more not system but character class. But yes, and Greg says it was widely disliked in 1E, the Summoner.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah, the original had an incorrect spell list that was too strong.
Famously very powerful character.
Yeah, so. Well, there we go. I mean, that's the news. So we've got an exciting playtest coming out, and also these sort of changes of the characters and things like that. Exciting things. And then Eilidons could become better than PCs. Oh dear, you never want that. You don't want summons that are better than you, unless it's a one-turn summon that comes along. But other than that, you're like, oh well, so I'll just go home then. It's like, I don't need you, because summon the awesome people. Very good, very good. Any more news, Dan?
That's all I have in terms of news for now.
Well, that's still been exciting news roundup. So we've got some cool stuff coming. And in terms of, I mean, are you going to be buying the Agents of Edgewatch book based on the art?
I probably won't buy them. The thing is, Paizo very kindly sent us all of Agents of Edgewatch so far as review copies, and we've never reviewed it on the show because we've ended up reviewing all of the Starfinder stuff and all of the sort of expansion books. Like, adventure parts are quite hard to review, especially 6-part ones, because you don't want to spoil them.
Exactly.
So. I don't know. I'm still tempted by playing it. The trouble is, I get very little time to play stuff or GM stuff that is not part of the podcast, and and I'm still not convinced that Agents of Edgewatch is the right thing for us to do as a podcast, as a show. So if we're not going to do it as a show, then I don't really have time to play it off air as much as I would like to. Although we did, without spoiling anyone who's listening currently, a monster from it has cropped up in the show recently. So I still get to use the back matter and things like that from them. I still take monsters and things from the books.
Yeah, well, this is fair enough. And obviously, you tend to reskin stuff anyway, so it might be the monster you expect it to be.
How is that for talking about the current show without spoiling it? I'm getting good
really
now,
good.
aren't
You're
I?
getting really good, really good. And that's the thing. It's just sort of how it's difficult when we've just done a record. I think that they're the dangerous times when it's literally fresh in our minds, and then give it a week or so, and we're like, oh yes, we can talk about it a bit more objectively. But speaking of past characters and things like that, which might be to do with the show, maybe they're not. So we compiled a fun little sort of 5-person list of characters that we have played over the years that we enjoyed, and not in any particular order, and then potentially we might pit them in an imaginative battle and see who would win. We don't have to describe that battle. We're not talking sort of Star Trek style knives drawn, although that would be awesome. But just kind of like maybe more of a general talk about character classes and what would work against what.
That'd be fun.
Do you want to kick us off?
This was a suggestion by some of our patrons. Actually, there was a discussion on the in the Danger Lounge, the patron exclusive area of the Discord, where they were discussing what topics they'd like on Dangerous Wednesdays, and talking about characters we had played in the past was one of the favourite characters from other games.
I seem to remember it was after a few gin slings, and there was a couple of people lying on the piano, on the grand piano, and the discussion came up about characters. It all goes on in the lounge. It's all happening there.
That's what the lounge is like, man.
Oh yeah, it's pretty bougie. So yeah, but it's a really, really interesting idea. And then when Dan sort of brought it up, I thought, yeah, that's a good one. We do talk about characters quite a lot, but it's something that's innately personal to all of us, and of course is not exclusive to players, because DMs, GMs, keepers, whatever you want to call them, you've got your NPCs in there, you've got your characters that you've come up with lovingly, and maybe they got a raw deal and you put a lot of thought and effort into them, and then they died at the sort of a stroke because nobody wanted to talk to them, or perhaps they actually ended up being a sort of a one-word wonder who turned into something pretty major because you just made them up on the fly. Which would you say is more likely in your case, Dan?
I think all of the ones I've got on this list they had some thought going to them, at least. They weren't just ones I'd kind of come up with on the day.
What's their name? Q character who's going to be a regular appearance, But yeah.
I mean, they still have terrible names, but this is me. But they had some thought going to them.
Imaginative names, Dan. The personal names that you've lovingly crafted from the deepest, darkest recesses of your subconscious.
Well, I have a character in here I played once for a few hours, and I have a character in here that is probably the longest running character that I have across any game system. And I've got a mix. I've got 3 Pathfinder and I've got 2 non-Pathfinder characters. So really spread it across different things. How's yours? What's your range of characters like?
Mine is quite broad. I've got 3 main characters who I've had from different campaigns, because it's difficult not to include them on a list of favourite characters because you get to know them so well and they're particularly fond of them for certain reasons. And then a couple that were just one-shots who one of them I put a lot of effort into the backstory and really engaged and was like, that's a really, really cool sort of backstory, and then never came out. And and then the other one just made me laugh and was lots of fun to play. So do you want who'd you like to begin?
How do you want to begin it? You're the host. How do you want to start it? Do you want to do one of yours?
I'll tell you what. If we do one of mine, just because you've had a chance to give you a chance to relax and take a back seat and get your breath back. Exactly, because you do a lot of talking now, which is all very interesting, very good stuff about the play testing. And of course, like we always say, if you play any of these characters or if you have any experience with the play test, let us know. Get on the Discord. I think the first person that had to come up was the character that we genned for the first campaign, which got me into role-playing again as an adult, and that was Arcan. Arcan Songsteel, the greatest paladin in the world. Just because we looked at the party, and as usual, there was no healer, so I was like, Dan, what are your suggestions for a kind of party healer? And he said, well, what about a paladin? Basically, a healer in a full suit of armour. I was like, can he have a big sword? He said, yes, he can. I was like, cool, sold. Do it. Do you want to go human? No, I'm going to push the boat out. Half elf. Oh, wow. How little did I realise what a sort of classic choice that was for your first character. Just dipping the toe into the fantasy world. Now, but bear this in mind, as you know from previous shows and experience, I used to roleplay, and I have roleplayed through computer games and stuff like that sort of continuously. But this was the first time I was getting involved in a D&D campaign since kind of school. So it had been a long time. It had been a long time, about 12, 13 years since I'd ever sort of done this kind of stuff. And it was one of those cases where it was on paper, sounded great. I didn't know anything about lawful good at all, because it was 3.5 as well, so you've had to police your party. And, well, what were your impressions of Arcan, certainly by the end of the campaign?
Well, it's a different thing to go into, and it's 3.5 Paladin versus Pathfinder Paladin. There are some differences there.
Yes.
So and the builds are a lot less varied with the 3.5 Paladin, I think, or certainly it was for us because we were just coming back into role-playing games, having not done them in years, so we weren't really sure what to do. So you kind of, because I've got a Paladin in my list, which is very different, but you kind of went down a sort of, was it sword and board or was it two-handed? But it was
two-handed.
It was kind of so it was a melee kind of build.
Yeah.
But then you kind of, I think, you really, you got stuck with the lawful good thing quite a bit. Although you had that really interesting backstory with him, because we did backstory games in that campaign where if we ever had somebody, it was so good because basically we ran a thing where if we ever had a key person missing for a session, that would make it quite difficult to play the next game, like someone who was really pivotal to the combat that was going on, or someone who really should have been there for the game that was planned, then rather than running that game without them and it being a bit eggy, I don't know why would do this. I would write a completely original backstory game. I would give pre-gen characters to everyone else except whoever's backstory it was. So it was basically Lockdown Legends. It was what we did for that.
Yeah,
and we would tell the backstory of one of these characters. And the interesting thing was you and Ross's character's backstory, because you had a shared one. And what happened to the two of you in your backstory?
Well, now this is bearing in mind that we'd done a few backstories by this point, and normally they were either super whimsical nonsense sort of tales or tales where you're guaranteed to win. And in ours, we lost. We got beaten. We went on a mission. I can't quite remember the specifics of why we went there, but we went there with a bunch of other paladins who were supposed to be our elders. One of whom, the most powerful of which, was played by a good friend of ours, Mr. Lee Rabbits. And he, let's just say he declined to become involved in the crucial combat and instead decided to climb up and down a ladder, having a look every now and then, assessing that we were definitely losing the fight and then going back down the ladder again. It wasn't even sort of a lack of courage. It was more a sort of measured like, nah. So yeah, we actually lost. We got captured. At the time, I was a little bit mortified because you're like, oh man, like my backstory, we get beaten. But actually, it did kind of work. You did wind it in quite nicely and narratively with it.
It was fun to try because it was that. There's always that thing of when you do a backstory or when you do a sort of a game set in the past, what happens if a character dies who is later open? And we had basically a TPK. Apart from Lee, he got away.
He got away.
It was basically the reverse of the kind of the comeuppance scene you get in all sorts of movies, where where the character kind of shuts the door on everyone else and is like, oh, there's no time, and then they get killed and everyone else escapes. Except it was the opposite. Lee just literally closed the door and walked away and lived, and everyone else got killed.
Yeah, killed and captured.
As it turned out later, barely survived and was captured, and that was how you ended up meeting everyone, was you fought your way free. But it was just an interesting way of kind of like a backstory that should have gone nowhere that ended up forming more story for it.
It did. It did. And it was.
I don't think you'll play a lawful good character again, will you? I think you
Well, it's difficult because you did obviously. It was a completely different system. We were using 3.5, and we hadn't all this kind of stuff, and it was really. I felt quite a big pressure because when it suited some of the party, they would call upon that and criticise it, despite the fact most of the time rampaging around the place, being utterly amoral and doing whatever they wanted, and then they'd turn around and be like, why aren't you policing the party? Because if I did, I would basically, they'd have to have murdered me, and I didn't. It's that kind of choice. But what it led to was a very interesting sort of. What's the word? Not moral flexibility. What sort of moral flexibility in what was classed as sort of what you could get away with? Because the rules in 3.5 were pretty strict. They were like, if something's not just and good and for the a worthy thing, then you should kill them. Like if they don't cease to do it. And no player wants to sit there being like, sorry everybody, I can't allow you to do this because it's not lawful and good and just. I mean. Whose story? It's like you'd basically have to live an Arthurian legend to kind of have that level of nobility and goodness. So instead, there was lots of moral justifications going on, and it really made me think early on about how flexible they could be. And in the end, really, his cause was the greater good, which is quite a classic sort of thing. Yes, you see, now that's... So, Chris, I've just interrupted. Now, Chris, that's exactly how Dan rolled his Paladin. And that is now a classic thing. The key to playing a lawful good character is who is too dumb to notice when the party does something bad. And that's precisely
a bit of that.
Because yours is just sort of
He's on the list, so we can... Well, should we do my Paladin then? Should we jump straight across to that one? That
do you know
seems
what?
like an easy...
I think that would be quite an interesting one because also, it's worth pointing out, Arcan wasn't the sharpest tool in the box. But
True.
At the same time, it was still, we did, some of that group did some horrible, horrible things. We did play for 2.5 years, so it was bound to have a couple of games where it was like, Tell us about your Paladin, Dan.
So my Paladin, this is probably the longest running character I've ever had. I've been playing him for nearly 3 years in a Kingmaker campaign. This is Sir Jace Gallowbride, who is he is a catfolk paladin. So he is he's a lion basically, who rides around. This big lion in shining armor, rides around on a war horse. He was thrown out by his family, by his father. He doesn't understand why. He doesn't even really know that he was thrown out. He thinks he's sent out on a quest. His father doesn't love him because his father is human. And Sir Jace's the house weapons trainer is a catfolk, and Sir Jace does not understand why his father hates the weapon trainer so much and never loved him as much as his other children. And so Sir Jace was sent out. He still believes he's human, and he now has a son of his own, who is definitely not grifting him, who is human. Like, he doesn't get that he's a catfolk. So yes, he's a paladin. This is Pathfinder. So he's a paladin of Abadar. So he believes in law. He believes in fair taxation. He believes in in money lending.
Wow!
Like, it's really kind of, but it's really fun because he's built to be. It's not quite lawful stupid. Like, he has a wisdom of 6. So he is not going to pass any sense motive check. So if the party need to take someone around the corner and rough them up for information, they can usually tell Sir Jace to go and look over there, to look after the crowd or do something like that. And it will just not occur to him. Also, the leader of the party is like his childhood friend who he hero worships, so he will believe anything from. And so he's incredibly gullible towards the rest of the party. But the downside for the party on that is if they leave him alone, he's likely to then recruit people and help just start giving money to either give money to beggars or give second chances to all of the captured bandits that they've got and enroll them in a fighting school with them. So they'll come back and find that now they've got a bunch more mouths to feed because Jace is on this kind of quest to redeem all of these people.
Right.
But I find it really fun because he's playing he's doing what is quite a difficult kind of job. Like in Kingmaker, you form a royal court, so he's the ambassador of this nation you've built. So he has to go and do treaties and things, but he doesn't really like paperwork. He really just wants to do jousting, and so he really struggles. He really struggles with kind of writing and maths and things, and yet he is a paladin of the god of coin, basically.
Yeah.
So he's really excited about the idea of taxation. And he gets really excited about Tax Fest, but he wouldn't be very good at doing his own accounts. Like he likes the idea of it, and he buys into the he buys into the idea of because Abadars are weirdly, in Pathfinder at least, there's this weirdly sort of socialist element to the god of money lending and banks, because there's Abadar's Abadar's holiday every year is called Tax Fest. Where everybody fills out their tax returns and takes them to the temple together. And then they throw a festival celebrating the good works that are done with public money by all of us coming together. And I'm like, that's weirdly socialist.
Yeah, it's actually quite nice as well. I'll probably be down with that. I'd fill my tax return out if it was a big party day. I'd be like, yeah, I've got my tax return ready done and we'll give it together and yay.
Chris says, a party about how good the roads are, and he's broken as hell. Like, if you want to talk about builds, we're level 9 now, I want to say, something like that, or might be a bit lower than that. But I've taken him down the lay on hands and mercy build route, which if you build first edition paladins, leads to ultimate mercy, which is one of the most broken feats in first edition Pathfinder because it allows you to cast Raise Dead with effectively no material component. So you can just bring people back from the dead. You get negative levels, but they disappear over time. So he's kind of entirely built around being able to bring people. He's a healer build paladin, but without any oracle levels. So he's pretty fun for that.
Chris
becoming pretty varied.
Has said he's corporate. He's literally a fat cat. Hey,
yes,
but he's basically pay your taxes, everybody, and I'll heal you and recruit you, and I'll smoke my cigar if there was one in there. So, he sounds great fun. Lovely image as well.
I've now been playing him for so long. He's existed I've been playing him for a character longer than the wrestling career of the wrestler he was a pun joke. He was a joke about when I made him. So he's kind of grown. So I guess all my characters have silly names, but this was a silly name that has stuck with him at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a wonderful image, one that's been off used. Probably the most very famous example is not Aslan, but in Magic. One of the sort of planeswalkers is that sort of a white lion, and it's so terribly noble, in armor. There's something very appealing about seeing a large cat in armor. It just looks like we're going to take the symbol of sort of martial prowess and dress them in armor. That's really cool.
Oh, and he's got the Squire feat, which is another of my favorite feats. So you get it's like a junior version of the of leadership. So you get a follower, but they're quite a few levels lower than you, and they carry all of your stuff, and like they can clean your weapons quickly and grab stuff that you've dropped and things. But in order to graduate into a full follower and get more powerful, the only way they can do it is that you have to witness them defeating an enemy of equal level in single combat. And so like every game at the moment has just been me being like, Dirk, this is your exam, get in there. And like 2 seconds later, oh my God, no, oh God, no, right, everyone else in, exam cancelled, Dirk's nearly dead.
Amazing. And thank you, Steph, for correcting me. It is Ajani, of course, is the planeswalker in question. I couldn't quite remember because I had to stage an intervention and stop myself playing Magic, because it's starting to take over everything.
Give us another character, James.
So another character. Well, okay. Well, in this sort of situation, though, who do you think would win between Arcan and Ajani? Ajani? No, not Ajani. Your guy, Sir Jace. Sir Jace. So we've got Clash of Paladins, but 1.3.5, a bit old school.
Assuming they're equal level, because obviously Arcan capped out a little higher.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I don't know. Like Jace has got a lot of healing, but he's very focused. He's team built. That's the thing. I'm not sure how well he'd fare in single combat. He's very much, because I took all of his riding feats off. I retrained out of them, so he doesn't have all the really good like mega charges and things like that. He's just built around healing. So you might be able to outlast him. He's got so many lay on hands. So
he's very handsy, then, is he?
He is.
He's very handsy. I mean, I think that would probably. Because Arcan, for all his levels, that was the thing about Paladins. They start off quite strong in 3.5, and then they got progressively weaker, really, because they didn't really get any sort of commiserate skills. Like their core stats didn't go up very much. And so by the end, everyone was like, come on, in you go, you should be in the front. It's like, I will literally die quicker than you. I don't know. There is also a planeswalker called Jace. You're quite right, Steph. So I think they'd probably fight for a bit and then sit down and have a good old chat. I think they'd probably be quite good mates.
I mean, they've both got high AC and they can't smite each other. So either way, I think the players would walk away from the table before they killed each other. It would just take them hours.
It would take them hours, and I think that as characters, they would probably because Arcan did used to like talking, and they probably just start talking and then decide that they had lots in common. So that'd be probably a draw. Two paladins clashing, but we might change things up a little bit. Now, I suppose we could change things up and go for an odd character, one that haven't used before, because we are actually running slightly short of time, so we probably won't be able to do 5 today, which is fine because we will sort of carry us on to other weeks.
Come back to it, like a little feature.
Yeah, definitely. And I really liked Barnval Snoots. Who was a character we did for the Beelzebub backstory when we were in the Precipice Quarter, the Disastrous taking it back, and I really liked him. He had I need to dig out the details because I sort of put him on the list. I was like, I don't even have the character sheet, but he's an example of one of those characters that I wrote. I started looking into because he was from the island that where sort of scholars come from and things like that. But it was a very as soon as I read the where he came from, it was like, ooh, that's really interesting, and I came up with some interesting ideas for his character. And yes, and expanded it, and none of it came out. He was just overly jolly. I think Candice particularly liked him because he was just sort of a very sort of jolly, happy character. But there was also all this subplot behind it. And I'm sure you must have had characters where you did have quite a lot of plot that you wanted to get out that never did. What would be sort of, are they on the list, or have you got an example?
He was a Hermaean expatriate, wasn't he?
That's it. Yes, Hermaean. Yes. And as soon as I read about the lore of the place, I was like, oh my god, that's so cool.
So I remember you were gutted when Scott killed him, and it was kind of like, oh, I mean, that's kind of the throwaway thing of that's kind of the gimmick of what we're doing. It's kind of Goblin Quest in Pathfinder.
Yeah.
But like, you'd been alive long enough to get quite attached to him and to like have some plot threads.
Well, yeah, and I did have this backstory of him, and I thought at least hopefully he might, run off down a side alley. I like, hey, let's face it, you should have the choice what happens to your character. Shouldn't be done by another player in the group. I still stand by that. So yeah, but having that choice taken away was quite gutting, and I never got a chance to explain all the backstory and stuff.
What have I got? Have I got a character that I've got a couple of level 1 characters. I was going to do my insane Pythocon one, but I'll tell you what, if you want to talk about a character that I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to, how about this?
Yeah.
Character that I really fell in love with, my favorite second edition character, not that I get to play second edition very much, was the character that I played on Stu Jackson's Tales from the 20 Side podcast.
She was
Missed
great.
One that I remember. That was really fun, and it's the character that made me fall in love with
Weaver.
clerics, which I've never been a cleric player before. I'd never really wanted to get them, and then I got Gods and Magic just before we were going to record this thing, and was flipping through it and was like, you know what, I'm going to make something based completely around one of these entries in this. I'm just going to take all of the info from that and build a character around it and see what happens. And so I picked Grandmother Spider, which seemed really interesting, and just built a cleric around that. So we've got this little old halfling lady, and she's kind of Granny Weatherwax. She's kind of like this sort of lady who's been around a bit and seen it all. And then as it went on, she got a kind of a weird, slightly sinister, like Cockney vibe to it as well. Yeah. It became like a weird, threatening granny.
All of
the,
because we were talking about the sort of toffee and knives, and I think sort of we were just sort of joking together about that character, and then it became this weird trope. She had coffee or knives, like the in Narcos about the sort of lead or silver. That kind of threat, and it just made us laugh. And then it became a character feature, and it was great. It worked really well, didn't it? I loved how you played her. She was so fun.
She was really good fun, and all of her spells were based around fate, and it was all about kind of threat. All of her language was about tugging on threads and about things like that. And the visuals of all of her spells were weaving threads that then stretched out and sort of did bless and things like that, and she was just a delight, and I was getting really into playing her, to the point that the character I'm playing in Alakar's Curse of Strahd game that he started running on Club, we've only played one game of it, but my character in that is pretty much Mrs. Weaver done again. It's just like excuse to play that character again.
I did wonder when Candice said, "Oh, he's playing Mrs. Chips," and I was like, that sounds similar to Mrs. Weaver. But to be honest, I think that's as a sort of nice takeaway from what we're discussing. There, you do play these characters, and then there are elements where you're like, actually, I liked that element. And in fact, Greg asks, what is it you like about clerics? What sold you on them? And it's. I think you've kind of been answering that, haven't you? It's the character, the flavour.
Yeah, and I like the focus of it. I like kind of, because I think when you start playing role-playing games, your instinct is to rebel against the thing, and you always want to be, you want to be the goodly drow. You want to take the thing that the book says it is, and then play the opposite of that, and be a sort of a renegade. And as I've gotten older, I've started really liking leaning into concepts and just embracing them and seeing how far we can take it. And it's why I've suddenly come around to liking clerics from a lore standpoint, because you can read all of the stuff about your god, especially since Gods and Magic came out, because it's such a lovely book. You can kind of read all of the stuff that it is about, that you would know as someone who grew up with that faith, and then you can build a personality about that. And all you need is sort of your anathema and your tenets, the two things, the things that you think are good and the things that you think are bad. And from that, you can build a really interesting personality.
Yeah.
That, and I do quite like the cleric spell list because it's got a lot of utility stuff in it, and I really like buffing.
Yeah, they're
As a
great for buffing.
spellcaster, that's kind of how I like to play. I'm not really a blaster. I like to be the person who is kind of just like, you get some extra AC. You get a +1 to hit, and I'm just going to stand at the back throwing out all of this stuff that makes everyone else better.
Yeah, definitely.
That's how I like. That's a kind of style of play that I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. And to acknowledge, as soon as Candace said, not me, I was like, oh no, it's Steph. And both Chris and Steph were like, it was me. Yes, you're quite right.
I was wondering how Candace knew that.
I know, exactly.
Candace knows everything.
Although Chris did say that so much so is Mrs. Chips reminiscent of Mrs. Weaver, you actually called yourself Mrs. Weaver a couple of times during the game.
Did I? I thought I'd avoided it. I was trying not to,
And to be fair, I think we did about 8 games with Stu and Tales from the 20 side. So she did have a fair old crack. This wasn't like a one shot. Like, we did have quite a few games with her, but she was great.
We got to play quite a bit. Yeah, that's why we got quite so attached to him. And I know I really liked your character was ridiculous.
Ridiculous. And you never found out about the beard.
No.
He was wearing a quite obviously fake beard that had a whole story to it. Actually, I should have included him, and I gave him the most ridiculous voice. But yes, it was very funny. I tell you someone else I'd like to find out a bit more about, and Greg has piped up with he agrees, he likes being inspired by the deity portfolios, and he's drawn up a character, Theseus Strongman, the Kyrgyz brawler cleric, who's a PE teacher and athlete cleric. That sounds cool.
Kyrgyz is the next... Kyrgyz or Kyrgyz, I think it's
Kyrgyz. Is it Kyrgyz?
And that's the next thing I want to make, because it's Kyrgyz is the god of like fair play and sporting achievement. So he's like, and his artwork is just this big smiley strong guy. Like he is the himbo of Pathfinder, and like all of his tenets are about like you should engage people in fair competition and you should accept when you've lost and be a good sport about it and all this kind of stuff. So he's kind of like he's almost like a battle god, but he's a really fair battle god. I really like that.
Amazing.
Really jolly.
That's phenomenal. I love the sound of that. So go and ready the special prayers from 1E. Yeah, exactly. Well, there we go. And in a competition, I mean, I think Mrs. Weaver would have definitely won in a competition with Barnval Snoots. He wasn't actually very good. More, I think, a sort of flavour character, but he did have a really interesting. And it was actually, it's funny that we both had those characters, because it was very much when you read the lore of something that you think sounds quite cool, and you gave us this big long list of stuff that we could basically be, in terms of more like a sort of job list, and I just picked it, and then once I started looking into the because I went to the most obscure ones I could, and it was something the Hermitite, whatever it was, Hermaean. Sorry, I'm reading a book on Persians at the moment, so I think that's what's coming in there, and. And it was just once I started reading the lore, I was like, this is awesome. I had all these ideas coming about this weird lost island and all this kind of like what his mission was and what he was going to be doing and his ethos. And the same thing for you. And like you just said about the Pantheon guide, and you read about a deity and then suddenly, boom,
Yeah. It's. I really enjoyed. I assume anyone who is listening to this or watching this kind of went through all of Lockdown Legends. See you, Greg. But if you haven't heard the Beelzebub episodes, like the second set of Lockdown Legends one we did, and we did live at PaizoCon, they are really fun because everyone just plays loads of different level 0 characters, and it's just playing with the backgrounds and seeing how much of a character you can make just out of that couple of lines of text from a background. I think they were really fun.
Definitely, I think they really, really were, and there can be a lot of fun to be had in that, because it gives you sort of like it's like a buffet that you can pick and choose, and then maybe if something takes your fancy, you can actually make a bit more of a meal out of it later, one that's not going to last 5 seconds. Oddly, think about food. I guess it must be coming for dinner time, and look at the time. It is. I know it is now just 2 minutes past 7, so we're out for the hour for Here at Dangerous Wednesdays, and I've had a really, really good time. This has been a tremendous chat. We've got a couple of things looking forward to in the future, and again, do jump on the Discord and let us know about your characters or any particular people you like to play.
Yeah, please do.
Like them. Yeah, go on, Dan.
tell us your favourites. I want to hear about some of your favourite characters. I like hearing about other people's characters. It's always good.
Yeah.
Just get a little bit of a chat going about it.
And also, it can only make you a better and more well-rounded player because you speak to people who've given these characters a run out, and then they can have some good advice, like, you know, the evolution. Because I'm sure that maybe I don't know if you played Jace after Arkham, but maybe Arkham was in the back of your mind if he was a precursor. Been like, maybe I'll make him a little bit less wise. Although I think that's quite a classic formula. I think we're going on. So do your research. But so this has been hopefully a very pleasant distraction from you from what's been going on in the world outside, as we always hope it will be. Don't forget there's the Danger Club you can catch up with. We've got Danger Recall. We've got loads and loads of stuff coming up. And of course, if you do follow my stream, you can check it out tomorrow, where we have musical coffee morning again. Whoa. On Thursday, which again will be non-political. But any last sort of comments from you, Dan? Anything you want to say?
You can't control that. It's a request show. I'm going to turn up there with loads of. I'm going to turn it into an anti-Vietnam show.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, war. I'd be down with that, to be honest. It's one of the best things about Vietnam War films, is the soundtrack. That's the good bit. Not that I'm saying they're bad films; they're just quite hard to watch sometimes. It's not one you stick on. Speaking of, I haven't watched a Vietnam War film in ages. I can't remember the last time I did. Anyway, that's a complete sidetrack and a side thing. You did that to me. But thank you so much for joining us here on Dangerous Wednesdays. And of course, it's goodbye from Dan.
Goodbye from me, everyone. Thank you, as always. See you next time.
Absolutely. And it's goodbye from me, James Foxy Lockhart. Hoping you've had a great time and looking very much forward to seeing you again very, very soon. But for now, look after yourselves and stay dangerous. See you later, guys. Bye.